We've had a really, really amazing experience the past 2.5, 3 days that we've all been together. And across all of Janaagraha's sessions, we've had a total of 27 speakers, and many of you in the audience and many, many others who have attended the sessions and really added richness to the conversations.
So I think one of the next steps that we should be contemplating is how we might do that, how we might continue to remain in touch. We might possibly reassemble at some future date and see how this might all be seen as part of a larger ongoing process of building a community of researchers and practitioners on all kinds of urban questions in India.
So I think this is going to be a challenge for many of us inside the sector, in the country, in education, to say, look, we've got to wake up, we've got to really focus on one of the richest problem sets in the world, and get our act together and get going and working together much more to try and deal with that. And then we move to this fascinating exchange here, and I think carrying it forward and trying to see whether we can run an exercise like this relatively soon, whether it's in a year or 2 years is something I think we have to collectively decide on. And finally, even though we don't have any clear recommendations that you would normally get out of a process, but taking the message that the community is coming together and starting to think and has a voice of its own to Delhi. And in Delhi, it's not a conversation only with the Planning Commission and the ministers. I think the interesting thing that we try to do in Delhi is to get the cities, to get the state governments in and say, look, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in this country, but that's bubbling up from below. It doesn't work to take all those resources and dump it from the top. You need to look at what's actually happening on the ground, and that's what we hope to do.
One thing about IUC and what happened here was that it was very exciting to have people from across platforms, from different contexts, gathering under one umbrella. And in the deep dive sessions, we had 2 cross-cutting deep dive sessions, which were very, very useful in order to understand the kind of evidence that other people are generating. And I think you'll agree with me, when you take up an issue, you have different perspectives that come in. I mean, we can talk about gender equity in education, but you have a health perspective on it, and you have other perspectives on it. So if we could have maybe more structured opportunities to meet people from the different sectors. We're all here under one umbrella, but maybe, and we've managed to, we have interacted outside the formal setting, but maybe to have the opportunity to do the same thing under this umbrella, because I don't know of any other conference where, so many people from so many varied contexts have come to share their ideas on common issues.
We talked about scheme challenges, how our central and state level schemes are designed to make it extremely difficult for the poor. There's one particular scheme called Integrated Low-Cost Sanitation, which works on, which is basically set up to provide sanitation toilets for the poor at a household level. Our experience in working in a small town of about 50,000 for the last 3 years was that it took us more than 1 year. It took the town more than 1 year to get past 5 steps of a total 9 steps in actually availing of those subsidies. And this was with Argyam hand-holding the town. So we're saying that something is wrong here. You can't really have schemes that are so complicated, require so much paperwork for poor to be able to access their basic services.
A lot of focus of infrastructure has been on highways and ports and airports. We really need to start focusing on infrastructure development in the small and medium cities. The JNNURM made a start about 7 years back. There's been a lot of activity that's been generated because of that, but it was also felt that small and medium cities need a real thrust. There needs to be more investment flowing in. They need to develop their database capacities in terms of their property tax records, in terms of their finances and their accounts, in terms of their spatial data map generations. And so these need to be pushed through reforms of the next generation of JNNURM, and also through and this was seen as the only way in which private finance could be generated in order to finance the development of infrastructure in these cities. So these are just some of the themes that came out. When we go back and distill the broader sort of set of ideas that came out of this, we'll share them in the proceedings. But one of the things that stands out obviously is that each of these themes has a tremendous impact for policy on financial sector development in India?
Culture is something, that helps us in understanding who we are and where we come from. It's very essential for local identity, for our own identity. And this is particularly, it's not to criticize the campus or anything. I think it's an excellent campus for IT, very efficient, in its deliverables, efficient in all aspects. But of course, our group did feel that we were sort of looking for, where we can see a bit of Mysore. Where are we? It could be anywhere in the world. So that, and finally, one of our speakers was very happy to see the Mysore sandal soap, which is a handicraft product. It's a patented product, recognized for its in the creative industries internationally. So it's probably, if now we have done several workshops and all, and of course we are used to doing it in a very inspiring environment like the Amer Fort, where you can see things happening right there. But even for an urban forum like this, it'll be very good if we can look at some urban spaces or be around that. And the education, I really like that they chose a ward out here. We could have also done a similar thing because Mysore has so much of heritage, but I think that's a very good initiative that they took of involving the locals there.
There was one thing which came out very, very strongly, and that was on the need for good governance and democratic decision making, the need for inclusive planning, because unless and until you put your governance systems in order, you are only going to talk and nothing is actually going to happen on the ground, because a lot of reform actually has to happen there. And the urban local bodies and the development authorities and the laws and so on, that is where the reform has to actually happen. Otherwise, we will only be having intellectual debates and doing a lot of research and paper presentation, but that has to actually happen there. And how do we do that advocacy? And then finally, we also wanted to know who is actually in charge of the city, because there are one too many agencies and there are so many people, and there's a lot of sectoral divide. So who is actually responsible? You can't actually keep throwing the buck around. Therefore, these are 5 or 6 important messages which have emerged, for which I think we really don't have clear answers at the moment.
Over the last 2 years to put this together, and it would not have happened without the active participation of so many of you. This was actually an experiment for us of collaboration in many ways. We started to say, can we have a participatory inquiry process? And very often in the country we are told NGOs aren't able to collaborate. We said, well, first of all, we want to show that NGOs can collaborate. People on, doing the practice work can collaborate. But we opened it up even further to say, can we collaborate with researchers, with academics, as well as the policymakers and policy organizations. So I think this was the first step towards that, and we are actually delighted with the outcome. We had 3 partners, Janaagraha, Yale, and IIHS, but really the context anchors, the various context anchors are the ones that were an incredibly integral part of this. So I want to say thank you very much, Shikha, Drona, Arghyam, IFMR, PHFI, as well as IIHS, India Urban Space, which was our organization, but School of Planning and Architecture. All of these were very, very important, and Yale University faculty that came here, as well as Pratham. So thank you all. It actually was a success because you all anchored every one of the vertical sessions, and I think the cross-pollination and the integration that we all look for, which is exactly what Urban India is all about, and the studies on Urban India is all about, really came together. So I think that there are many things that we did, which we experimented with, some of which succeeded really well beyond our dreams, and some of which were still in the process of experimentation that we have to tighten and make sure it works better. But I think this was a good beginning, and that's the sense that I get from everybody that I have spoken to in this conference.